I am standing in front of the window of the old family house, and my hands are shaking so badly that I almost dropped the keys. I came here to prepare a special surprise for Harper, my daughter, just before her engagement dinner. The house has been boarded up for years, ever since I became a widow, but I decided it would be the perfect gift to celebrate her wedding to Liam. I thought I would be alone. I thought I would have the whole afternoon to clean, to reminisce, to prepare every detail before handing her the keys tonight during dinner. But there are voices inside. I recognize Harper's voice immediately. She is talking to someone, and something in her tone makes me freeze, hidden behind the frame of the side window. I peek in just barely, trying not to make a sound. And what I hear in the next few minutes leaves me completely frozen. Every word that comes out of my daughter's mouth feels like something is being ripped out of me from the inside. I can't move. I can't breathe right. I feel goosebumps rise all over my skin, and a terrible chill runs down my spine. This cannot be happening. Not my Harper. Not my baby girl. But the words keep coming through the old glass, clear and cruel. And I realize that I am not the one who will be giving the surprise today. The surprise has just been given to me, and it is the worst of my entire life. Just 3 hours ago, I was in my apartment getting ready for this day with so much excitement that I could barely sleep last night. I put on my burgundy dress, the one Harper gave me for my last birthday. I did my makeup carefully, wanting to look good for the dinner photos. I put the house deed and documents in my purse, those papers that represent 30 years of sacrifice, of mortgage payments made on time, of keeping that place standing even though I didn't live there anymore. The house is located in the neighborhood where I grew up, about 40 minutes from downtown. It's an older craftsman-style build but solid, with that front lawn where Harper used to play when she was little. Since Jim, my husband, died, I haven't had the strength to come back here much. It hurts too much. Every corner reminds me of when we were 3, when life seemed to make complete sense. Jim passed away 18 years ago from a massive heart attack. He was only 52. One day he was laughing at the breakfast table, and the next he was gone. Harper was 20 back then. She was in college, studying business administration. I remember she cried so much at the funeral, clinging to my arm, telling me that now we only had each other. And I believed her. My God, how I believed her. After Jim died, I had to work double shifts to keep everything going. He was a CPA and had a stable income, but our savings weren't enough for what was coming. Harper still had 3 years of college left, then graduation, her first entry-level jobs, her plans to move out. I worked retail at a department store during the day and cleaned corporate offices 3 nights a week. I would get home close to midnight, take off my shoes at the door so I wouldn't wake Harper, and collapse into bed. But I never complained. She was my daughter. She was all I had left of Jim. It was worth every hour of overtime, every backache, every dinner I skipped so she wouldn't lack anything. When she graduated with honors, I felt like it had all been worth it. My little girl was a professional, an educated woman, someone who would have better opportunities than I did. Harper got a job at a mid-sized firm as an administrative assistant. The pay wasn't great at first, about $3,000 a month, but it was a start. She kept living with me because she said she wanted to save for her future. I was happy to have her close. The apartment felt less empty with her there, but over the years I started noticing changes. Small things at first. Harper would come home late and wouldn't call. She stopped asking me how my day was. When I spoke, she seemed to be thinking about something else, looking at her phone, answering me with one-word responses. She would brush it off when I felt sick or needed help with something. I told myself it was normal, that she was growing up, building her own life, focused on her career. Daughters become emotionally independent. I repeated that to myself. It is part of the natural process. I couldn't expect her to remain my little girl attached to my hip. I had to let her fly. 2 years ago, Harper asked me to borrow money. She said she wanted to take a specialized certification course that would open doors at her job. She needed $5,000. I didn't have that amount sitting around, but I took out a small personal loan from the bank. I gave her the money without asking her to sign anything, without setting a deadline. She was my daughter. I trusted her. She never paid that money back. When I brought up the subject months later, she got annoyed. She said I was making her feel guilty, that she had expenses too, that she would pay me when she could. I ended up stopping asking so I wouldn't create tension between us. After all, I thought, when I'm gone, everything will be hers anyway. What does it matter if she pays me now or later? Then came other requests. She needed help with the security deposit for an apartment she wanted to rent. Another $3,000. Then it was the used car she found on sale. $2,500 more. Always with promises of repayment that were never kept. And I was always yielding, always finding a way to get the money, always believing that I was helping my daughter build her life. 8 months ago, Harper introduced me to Liam. He is 40, a civil engineer, an educated and kind man who seemed to genuinely love her. He came from a good family. He had a stable job at a large construction firm where he made about $8,000 a month. When I saw them together, I felt enormous relief. My girl had found someone good, someone who would take care of her, someone with whom she could form the family I always dreamed of for her. Liam treated me with respect. He asked about my health. He offered to help me with things around the house. He brought flowers when he came to visit. He was the kind of son-in-law any mother would wish for. And best of all, he seemed to bring out the best side of Harper. When he was present, she was sweeter to me, more attentive, almost like the girl I remembered. 4 months ago, Liam proposed during a trip they took to the coast. Harper came home showing me the ring, beaming, hugging me with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen in her for years. We cried together that night. I felt like I was getting my daughter back, that the love of a good man had transformed her, that finally, we were close again. We started planning the wedding. It would be in 6 months, a simple but elegant ceremony. Liam and his family would cover most of the costs. But I wanted to contribute something significant. I wanted Harper to know that her mother was there, supporting her on the most important day of her life. That was when the idea of the house occurred to me. The old family home that had been closed for years, accumulating dust and memories. Harper had always loved that house. As a child, she played in the yard, climbed the apple tree in the back, hid in the attic. Jim and she had painted the picket fence together one summer, both ending up splattered with white paint, laughing under the sun. The house was worth money, not a fortune, but around $350,000, according to the last appraisal I got a year ago. I could sell it and divide the money for my retirement, for emergencies, to live my last years more peacefully. But every time I thought about selling it to strangers, I felt like I was betraying Jim's memory, erasing the happy years we lived there. Giving the house to Harper solved everything. She could live there with Liam, raise her children in the same place where she grew up, keep the family history alive, or she could sell it if they needed to and use that money to build their future. The important thing is that it would stay in the family, that it would have meaning, that it wouldn't just be a cold transaction with strangers. I hired a lawyer to prepare the transfer papers. Arthur Pennyworth, a serious man of about 55 who had worked with Jim years ago. He charged me $500 for all the legal work. I explained that I wanted everything ready to give to my daughter as a surprise at her engagement dinner. Arthur looked at me with a worried expression when I told him my plan. He took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly before speaking. He told me it was a very generous decision, but that I should think it over well, that a house was probably my biggest asset, my insurance for any emergency. He asked if I had other significant savings, if Harper knew about the plan, if we had talked about my future and my needs. I replied that my daughter would take care of me if I ever needed it, that she was the only thing I had left in this world, and seeing her happy was worth more than any property. Arthur said nothing else, just nodded and continued preparing the documents. But I remember the way he looked at me, as if he wanted to say something he didn't dare to pronounce. The papers were ready a week ago. I have everything kept in my purse right now. Deeds, transfer documents, the original keys tied with an ivory ribbon I bought especially for the occasion. I imagined the moment 1,000 times. Me standing up during dinner, all the guests watching, Liam smiling without knowing what was coming, and me handing Harper that envelope that would change her life. But this morning, while I was getting dressed, I felt it wasn't enough. I couldn't just hand her the keys to a house that had been closed for years, full of dust and neglect. I needed to go, open the windows, clean even just a little, make sure that when Harper went to see it, she found something presentable, something she could imagine as her future home. I called my friend Betty around 9 in the morning. Betty Miller is 70 years old and has been my neighbor for over 15 years. She is one of those women who doesn't hold anything back, who says what she thinks even if it hurts, but who would be by your side in any crisis. She was widowed 5 years ago, and since then, we have supported each other through the loneliness that comes with losing your life partner. I told her I was going to the old house to prep it a bit before the dinner tonight. Betty was silent for a few seconds on the other end of the line. Then she asked if I was sure about what I was going to do. I told her yes, that it was my decision and it would make me happy to see Harper settled there. Betty sighed deeply and only said to be careful. To call if I needed anything? There is something I must say about Betty. She has never been very affectionate with Harper. It's not that she treats her badly, but there is a distance, a subtle coldness in the way she speaks to her. Harper says Betty is a busybody, that she has opinions on things that don't concern her. Betty, for her part, has made comments over the years that I always tried to ignore. Once, about 3 years ago, we were having coffee in my kitchen when Harper arrived and asked to borrow money for I don't know what. I gave her what I had in my wallet without asking much. After Harper left, Betty looked at me with that expression of hers that mixes concern and annoyance. She told me that my daughter was using me, that a woman in her 30s with a steady job shouldn't be constantly asking her retired mother for money. I got angry with Betty that day. I told her she didn't understand because she didn't have children, that the relationship between mother and daughter was sacred, that I helped Harper because I wanted to. Betty raised her hands in surrender and changed the subject, but I saw in her eyes that she wasn't convinced of anything. Since then, we have had several similar conversations, Betty noting things I preferred not to see. Betty asking me why Harper never invited me to go out with her and her friends. Betty commenting that it was strange that my daughter didn't spend the full Christmas holidays with me, that she always had some excuse to leave early. Betty questioning why Harper didn't contribute financially to the household if she was still living with me until recently. I defended Harper every time. I explained to Betty that my daughter had her own life, her own expenses, her own priorities, that it was natural for a young woman to want independence, that I expected nothing in return for what I did for her because that is a mother's love. Unconditional, no invoices, no debts. But sometimes, in the early morning when I couldn't sleep, I wondered if Betty might have a point, if maybe I was being too complacent, if perhaps Harper wasn't taking advantage of my goodwill just a little bit. But I immediately chased those thoughts away. I felt guilty just imagining them. What kind of mother doubts her own daughter's love? I took the bus at 10:30 in the morning. I don't have my own car. I sold the one Jim and I shared years ago when the maintenance costs became too high for my budget. Harper has a car, the one I helped her buy, but she never offers to drive me anywhere. She says she is always busy, that her schedule is complicated, that the bus suits me fine anyway. The trip to the old neighborhood took almost an hour with all the mid-morning traffic. I got off at the familiar corner, the one where the bakery where Jim used to buy donuts on Sundays still stands. The lady who worked there then is gone, but the smell is still the same. Sweet, of freshly baked dough, of better times. I walked the 3 blocks to the house, feeling memories hit me with every step. There was the Thompsons' house, now painted a horrible color that doesn't do it justice. Further down, the small park where I took Harper when she was a baby. Everything the same but different, as usually happens with places we abandon. The house looks worse than I remembered. The exterior paint is peeling in several places. The front lawn is a disaster of overgrown weeds. The wooden fence that Jim and Harper painted together is gray and faded. It hurt to see it like that, as if the abandonment were a betrayal of the happy memories it holds. I took the keys out of my purse and opened the gate, which squeaks exactly the same as it did 18 years ago. I walked up the 3 steps of the porch, feeling the wood creak under my feet. The front door was swollen from the humidity, and I had to push hard to open it. The smell of a closed-up house hit me immediately, that mix of dust, dampness, and stalled time that abandoned houses have. I left the door open to let fresh air in and walked slowly through the living room. All the furniture was still covered with white sheets that now looked gray, the curtains drawn, gloom and silence. I stood in the middle of the living room, remembering. There was the armchair where Jim read the newspaper every afternoon. Over there, the corner where we put the Christmas tree. On that wall hung our wedding portrait that Harper took down when she was 15 because she said it looked old and ugly. I went to the kitchen thinking about where to start cleaning. It would have to be something quick, superficial, just so the place didn't look completely abandoned. Open windows. Take off some sheets. Sweep a little. I didn't have much time if I wanted to be back to get ready properly before the engagement dinner. That was when I heard the car. An engine stopping in front of the house. Footsteps, voices. My heart gave a strange jump. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one knew I was coming here today. I stood paralyzed in the kitchen, not knowing whether to go out and see who it was or wait. Then I heard her voice. Harper's voice. Clear, familiar, unmistakable. She was talking to someone, another woman, while they walked up the porch steps. They were laughing about something. I heard the front door open completely. Footsteps entering the living room. For an instant, I thought about going out and greeting them, asking Harper what she was doing here. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she was talking, that tone she never used with me. Maybe it was simple curiosity. Or maybe it was a gut feeling, that inner voice that warns you when something isn't right. I stayed hidden in the kitchen, pressed against the wall, without making a sound. I could partially see them through the partially open door. Harper and a woman I recognized as Sloane, a friend of hers from work. They were standing in the middle of the living room looking around, evaluating the space. Sloane said something about how big the house was, about how much it could be worth in the current market. Harper responded with a laugh that froze my blood, a laugh that had no joy in it, a calculating, cold laugh that I had never heard before. And then Harper spoke, and her words destroyed everything I thought I knew about my daughter, about my life, about the last 20 years of sacrifice. Harper told Sloane that the house would be hers very soon, that her mother, that old fool, had fallen completely for the plan. She used those exact words, old fool, as if she were talking about a stranger and not the woman who gave her life, who raised her alone after losing her father, who worked until exhaustion so she would never lack anything. Sloane asked how she had managed to convince me. Harper laughed again with that horrible laugh I didn't recognize. She said it had been easier than expected, that she only had to act a little more affectionate the last few weeks. Fake excitement for the wedding, include me in some unimportant plans, that I was so desperate to feel loved that I swallowed every crumb of attention she threw at me. I leaned against the kitchen wall, feeling that my legs wouldn't hold me. My heart was beating so fast I thought they would hear me. But they kept talking, oblivious to my presence a few feet away. Sloane commented something about Liam, asking if he knew about the plan. Harper let out a scornful cackle. She said Liam didn't know anything, that he was a good-natured idiot who believed in true love and all that nonsense, that she was using him just as much as me, but in a different way. He gave her economic stability, a respectable social status, access to circles she couldn't reach alone, but that she had never really loved him. I felt nauseous listening to that. Liam was a good man. He didn't deserve to be manipulated like that. But the worst was yet to come. Sloane asked what she planned to do with me after the wedding. There was a brief silence that felt eternal. Then Harper spoke with a coldness I will never forget as long as I live. She said the plan was simple. First, get the house, which according to her calculations, I would hand over to her this very night during the engagement dinner as a big maternal surprise. She already knew about my intentions because she had gone through my papers weeks ago when I went to the bathroom and left my purse open on the table. She found the documents Arthur prepared, read everything, and knew exactly what to expect. Then, after getting married and having the house legally secured in her name, the second phase would come. Convincing Liam that I was starting to show signs of mental deterioration. Small things at first. Forgetfulness, confusion, strange behaviors. She would take charge of planting those ideas in her future husband's mind during the first months of marriage. Sloane asked if I really had memory problems. Harper said no, that I was perfectly lucid, but that it didn't matter. That it was easy to make someone look senile if you set up the situations correctly. Hiding objects and then asking for them. Changing agreed-upon appointments and then saying I had confused them. Mentioning to Liam with feigned concern that I was repeating the same stories several times. The final goal was to put me in a nursing home. One of those cheap places where they store you and forget you. Harper calculated that with what it cost to support me, she could save about $3,000 a month. Plus, once I was institutionalized and declared mentally incompetent, she could take full control of my remaining finances. My Social Security check, which was about $1,800 a month, would go directly to her as my legal guardian. Sloane whistled, impressed. She said Harper had it all calculated. My daughter replied that of course she did, that she had been planning this for years, that being close to me all this time had been a strategy, not an act of filial love, that every time she asked me for money without paying it back, she was testing how far she could go, how much she could get out of me. She mentioned something then that broke me into pieces. She said that after her father died, she realized that I was weak, manipulatable, too needy for affection, that it was easy to become my only center of life, my reason for existing, because that gave her absolute power over me, that a lonely widow was the perfect target for this kind of long-term manipulation. Sloane asked if she didn't feel any guilt, if her conscience didn't bother her doing this to her own mother. There was another pause. I heard footsteps, as if Harper were walking around the living room inspecting something. Then her voice came clearer, closer to where I was hiding. She said that at first, maybe she felt something like guilt, but that over the years that went away, that she started seeing me as a burden, as an obstacle to her real life, that I represented everything she didn't want to be. A woman without higher education, without ambitions beyond serving others, settled for a mediocre life of useless sacrifices. She said I embarrassed her, that when her friends met their successful, professional, interesting mothers, she had to introduce me. An old woman who worked cleaning offices, who dressed in cheap clothes, who understood nothing of the modern world, that she was ashamed to take me to places where they might see her with me. Every word was a direct punch to the chest. I felt tears running down my cheeks, but I couldn't move. I couldn't make a sound. I had to hear everything. I needed to know exactly who my daughter really was. Sloane said something I didn't catch well. Harper replied that obviously she wouldn't tell Liam any of this, that he was traditional, had strong family values, and would never approve of treating a mother like that. That's why the plan had to be executed slowly, carefully, making him believe that everything was for my own good, that I needed professional help, that they were doing the right thing by putting me in a home where they could care for me adequately. She mentioned the name of a place then, Sunset Haven. She said she had already visited it, that it was a shady, state-run facility that would take almost all my Social Security check, costing us barely anything out of pocket, that the rooms were shared and basic but sufficient, that with luck I would last a few years there before dying, and all that time she would be collecting whatever was left of my pension, in addition to saving on my expenses. Then she talked about the house. She said it was worth much more than I thought, that she had consulted with a real estate agent without my knowing, and the real appraisal was $420,000 if some minor things were fixed, that she and Liam would never live here, that as soon as she had the papers in her name, she would put the property up for sale, that with that money they could buy a modern condo in a better area, more in line with what they aspired to. Sloane asked why not simply ask me to sell the house and give her the money. Harper explained that that would be too obvious, too direct, that I might refuse or decide to keep part of the money. But if I gifted her the house of my own free will, thinking it was a gesture of maternal love, then there was no turning back. The papers would be signed, the transfer complete, and I couldn't claim anything afterward. She also said she had manipulated my finances for a long time, that 2 years ago, when I lent her those $5,000 for the supposed specialized course, she actually used that money to go on spring break to Cabo with a boyfriend she had before Liam, that such a course never existed, that she simply knew I would believe any story that sounded like professional self-improvement. The money for the apartment deposit she never rented. The car that, according to her, was a unique opportunity and turned out to be a pretext to get more money out of me. Everything had been a lie. Everything had been part of a systematic plan to empty my pockets while making me believe I was helping my daughter progress. Sloane commented that it was impressive how well Harper had handled everything. My daughter accepted the compliment naturally. She said the key was keeping me emotionally dependent, that every time I showed signs of wanting to have a life of my own, she knew exactly how to make me feel guilty or lonely until I centered my entire existence on her again. She remembered when 5 years ago I mentioned I wanted to take painting classes at the community center. Something simple, an activity for myself, to meet new people. Harper immediately started complaining that I was abandoning her, that I preferred to be with strangers than with my own daughter. She cried. She made me feel like a bad mother for wanting something for myself. I canceled the classes. I never tried to do anything just for my own enjoyment again. Or when Betty invited me on a short trip with a group of friends 3 years ago. Just 4 days to the lake. Nothing extravagant. Harper staged a whole drama about how she needed me at home, about how she was going through a difficult time at work and required my support. I didn't go on the trip. I stayed taking care of her while she went out with her friends every night that week. Harper explained to Sloane that isolating me had been fundamental to her strategy. The less of a social life I had, the fewer people would be around to question her version of events when the time came to institutionalize me. That's why she always made a sour face when Betty came to visit. That's why she made derogatory comments about the few friends I had left from the old neighborhood. That's why she never encouraged me to go out, to meet people, to have my own activities. Sloane asked if I suspected anything. Harper laughed again with that laugh I no longer recognized as my daughter's. She said I was too naive, too desperate to believe she loved me. That mothers like me were the perfect victims because they preferred to live in denial rather than accept that their children didn't love them. She mentioned there were moments when she saw doubt in my eyes, when she asked for money and I hesitated a second longer to take out my wallet, when she canceled plans with me last minute and I opened my mouth as if to protest. But she always found a way to redirect my attention, to make me feel guilty for doubting her, to remind me that I was her mother and mothers didn't put conditions on their love. I heard Sloane move through the living room. Her steps approached the kitchen dangerously. I pressed myself harder against the wall. I held my breath. She peeked her head in barely, looked superficially at the dusty space, and backed away. She commented that it needed cleaning, but the structure looked solid, that it was a good deal Harper was about to get. My daughter agreed. She said that tonight, during the engagement dinner, I would make my big dramatic entrance, that I would probably cry while handing her the keys and the papers, that all the guests would be moved by the image of the selfless mother gifting her house to her daughter, that Liam would love her even more for having such a generous mother, that no one would suspect that behind that gesture was years of calculated manipulation. She said she would have to act surprised and emotional, hug me and cry too, put on all the necessary theater so the moment looked authentic, that afterward, in private, she would laugh remembering my face of idiotic happiness while handing her $400,000 without realizing it. Sloane asked when she planned to sell the property. Harper replied she would wait about 3 or 4 months after the wedding, enough time so it wouldn't look suspicious. She would tell Liam they had thought things over and preferred to live in something more modern, that he wouldn't object because the money would go to buying something better, that she could even convince him to invest part of that money into expanding his own portfolio or something that benefited him directly. Then they went back to the subject of institutionalizing me. Harper explained she would start the smear campaign about 6 months after getting married. Little comments at first, that she had found me confused on the street, that I forgot to take my meds, that I repeated the same story 3 times at a meal, that I left the stove on. She would invent situations, create false evidence, turn my life into a dossier of mental incompetence. She said she knew a doctor who, for the right price, could write a favorable report, that she calculated spending about $2,000 in bribes and legal fees to get full guardianship over me, that it was an investment that would pay for itself in less than 2 months, considering everything she could control of my finances. Sloane commented that it sounded like a lot of work. Harper replied it was worth it, that she had spent years enduring, pretending she loved me, listening to my boring stories, putting up with my unsolicited advice, pretending she respected me, that it was high time all that effort bore the fruit she deserved, that this house and my social security were just the beginning, that eventually, when I died, she would inherit whatever else was left. My few pieces of furniture, my cheap jewelry, even the small life insurance policy Jim left that I still paid monthly. I couldn't keep listening. I felt like I was running out of air. Tears ran uncontrollably down my face. My whole body was shaking. I had to bite my lip not to let out a sob that would have given me away. It was too much. It was unbearable. Every word confirmed that the last 20 years of my life had been a lie, that the love I felt for my daughter was a one-sided sentiment, that she had never loved me. Never. I heard them moving toward the door. Harper said she had seen enough, that she had to go back home to get ready for dinner, that tonight would mark the beginning of her new life, the life she had always wanted without the dead weight of a needy mother hanging around her neck. Sloane asked one last question before leaving. She asked if Harper didn't feel even a little bit of affection for me, if there was no childhood memory, no moment of genuine care that made her doubt her plans. There was silence. For an absurd second, I allowed hope to light up in my chest. Maybe there was something. Maybe deep in her heart, there remained even a spark of filial love. Maybe this was just a phase. Confusion, something we could resolve if we talked. But then, Harper spoke, and her answer finished killing me inside. She said that maybe when she was very little she had felt something, but that died years ago. That she looked at me now and only saw a pathetic woman, clinging to a dead past, living a life without purpose, beyond bothering her. That every time she saw me, I reminded her of everything she didn't want to be. Every wrinkle on my face, every slow movement of my hands, every old-fashioned comment I made, confirmed she had done right in deciding to get rid of me. She said her father's death had been the best thing that could have happened to her. That if Jim were still alive, she probably never would have been able to manipulate me so effectively. That he protected me, gave me attention, made me feel valuable. But once he died, I was left completely vulnerable, alone, desperate for love. And that desperation was what Harper had exploited all these years. I heard their footsteps going down the porch stairs, the gate squeaking as it closed, the car engine starting, the sound fading down the street until it disappeared completely. I stayed paralyzed against the kitchen wall. I don't know how much time passed. It could have been minutes or hours. The sun moved slowly, casting long shadows through the dirty windows. The silence of the abandoned house wrapped around me like a shroud. Eventually, my legs gave out, and I slid down until I was sitting on the cold floor. I hugged my knees to my chest and finally let it all out. I cried like I hadn't cried since Jim's funeral. I cried for the lost years, for the wasted love, for the daughter I never really had, for the life I sacrificed, believing I was building something beautiful, when in reality, I was just feeding a monster. I cried for every time I went without eating so she could have more, for every night I worked until exhaustion, for every dream of my own I abandoned, for every moment of pain I hid so as not to worry her, for every hug I gave without receiving anything real in return, for every I love you I pronounced, and that she only repeated like an empty echo without meaning. When I finally had no more tears left, I sat there staring at nothing. The kitchen where Jim and I had breakfast every morning, where Harper did her homework while I cooked dinner, where we celebrated birthdays, Christmases, where we shared thousands of meals as a family. Or at least that's what I thought we were doing. Now all that felt contaminated, fake, like a play where I was the only one who didn't know I was acting. I looked at my watch. It was almost 4 in the afternoon. The engagement dinner was scheduled for 7. In my purse, a few steps from where I was sitting, I carried the house documents, the deeds, the transfer papers perfectly prepared by Arthur, all ready to give Harper exactly what she had planned to steal from me disguised as a loving gift. I stood up slowly. My bones creaked. My whole body hurt, as if I had been physically beaten. I walked to the small bathroom next to the kitchen. I looked in the stained mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. My eyes were swollen and red. My makeup, run by tears, formed dark lines on my cheeks. My burgundy dress, the one Harper had given me and that I had chosen with such care for this special night, now looked wrinkled and sad. I saw myself old, tired, destroyed, exactly as Harper had described me a few minutes ago. A pathetic woman clinging to a dead past. I turned on the sink faucet. The water came out brown at first from the unused pipes. Then it cleared up. I washed my face with slow movements, almost mechanical. The cold water helped me recover some mental clarity. I dried myself with the sleeve of my dress because there were no towels. I went back to the kitchen and picked my purse up off the floor. I opened it and took out the documents. I spread them out on the old table that was still there, covered in dust. Property deeds in the name of Eleanor Vance. Transfer document prepared to change the name to Harper Vance. All legal. All perfect. All ready for my daughter to walk away with $400,000 without lifting a finger other than faking surprise and gratitude. I read every page slowly. Arthur had done an impeccable job. There were no legal loopholes. Once I signed and Harper accepted, the house would be hers irreversibly, and I would be left without my biggest asset, without a safety net, completely vulnerable to her plans to institutionalize me and control every aspect of my life until I died. I sat in one of the old chairs. Dust flew up, forming gray clouds in the afternoon sun. I thought of Jim. What would he say if he could see me now? What would he have done if he had heard his daughter speak of me with that contempt, with that calculated cruelty? Jim, who loved Harper madly, who called her his little princess, who worked hard to give her everything, who died without knowing his daughter would grow up to become this. Maybe it was better he died sooner. Maybe this pain would have killed him anyway. I remembered the last conversation I had with Jim before the heart attack. It was a Sunday morning. We were in this very kitchen, drinking coffee. Harper was still sleeping upstairs. Jim took my hand across the table and told me he loved me, that I was the best wife and mother he could have asked for, that he felt lucky every day to have had us by his side. I asked him what was wrong, why he was getting sentimental all of a sudden. He smiled and said he just wanted me to know that sometimes we take for granted what matters most, and he didn't want to make that mistake. 3 days later, he was dead, as if he had known his time was running out, as if he had wanted to make sure he left me those words for the difficult years to come. I wish Jim were here now. I wish I could hug him and cry on his shoulder like I did when something overwhelmed me. I wish I could ask him for advice. Tell me what to do with this pain that is eating me alive. But Jim wasn't there, and I would have to solve this alone. I put the documents back in my purse. I stood up and walked through the house. I went into every room as if saying goodbye. The living room, with its ghostly furniture under white sheets. The dining room, where we celebrated so many special occasions. The master bedroom where Jim and I slept in each other's arms for 25 years. Harper's room, smaller, where she grew from a baby to a woman. I stopped in the doorway of her old bedroom. The walls still had the posters she hung in her teens. Glow in the dark stars on the ceiling that Jim installed when she was 8. The mark on the doorframe where we measured her height every birthday. Everything intact, like a shrine to a girl who no longer existed, or who maybe never existed the way I believed. I thought of all the moments I remembered as proofs of her love. Her graduation, when she hugged me crying and thanked me for everything. But now those tears seemed fake, acted, part of the theater she staged to keep me hooked. The times she told me I was the best mom in the world. Hollow, mechanical words, said because she knew I needed to hear them. Every happy memory I had of her was now contaminated by doubt. Every smile could have been fake. Every I love you could have been a lie. Every gesture of affection could have been calculated to keep me where she wanted me. Docile, compliant, useful, an inexhaustible source of money, attention, and sacrifice. I went down the stairs slowly. I crossed the living room toward the exit. Before leaving, I stopped and looked back one last time. This house had been my home during the best years of my life. Here I built a family. Here I was happy. Here I loved and was loved, or at least I thought I was. Now the house felt like a tomb, a reminder of everything I had lost. First, Jim. Then, without realizing it, the daughter I thought I had but who turned out to be just an illusion. A mirage that I kept alive myself because the alternative was too painful to consider. I closed the front door and went down the porch steps. The sun was already down, staining the sky oranges and pinks. Soon it would be night. Soon the time for the engagement dinner would arrive. Soon Harper would be waiting for me to make my grand entrance with the keys and the documents, waiting for me to fall into her trap like the old fool she believed I was. I walked toward the bus stop with slow steps. My mind was working at full speed despite the emotional exhaustion. I needed to think. I needed to decide what to do. I needed a plan. I could not go to the dinner, disappear, let Harper wonder where I was. But that wouldn't solve anything. It would only postpone the inevitable. She would find a way to get close again, to manipulate me again. And I would still be vulnerable. I could confront her, tell her I heard everything, scream in her face that she is exactly who she is and who she plans to be. But that would only put her on guard. She would deny everything. She would say, I'm confused, that I misunderstood, that I'm making things up. And Liam would believe her. Everyone would believe her. I would just be the paranoid and possibly senile mother, imagining conspiracies where there aren't any. The bus arrived, and I got on. I sat by the window watching the old neighborhood pull away, the houses where I lived happy moments, the streets where I walked holding hands with Jim, the park where I took Harper as a child. Everything became smaller until it disappeared. I took my phone out of my purse. I had 3 missed calls from Betty, a text asking if I was okay, if I was done at the house, if I needed help with anything. Betty, who always knew. Betty, who tried to warn me so many times. Betty, whom I ignored because I didn't want to see the truth. I dialed Betty. She answered on the second ring. Her voice sounded worried. She asked where I was, why I hadn't answered her calls. I told her I needed to see her urgently, that something terrible had happened, that please wait for me at her apartment. She asked no more questions. She just said the door would be open. The trip back felt eternal. Every red light was torture, every bus stop an unbearable delay. I needed to talk to someone. I needed to get all this out that was drowning me inside. And Betty was the only person in the world I could trust now. I got off the bus near our building just past 5:30. I went up the stairs, almost running, despite the fatigue. I knocked on Betty's door, and she opened immediately. She looked at my face and knew instantly that something serious had occurred. She pulled me inside and shut the door. She said nothing. She just hugged me, and I crumbled again. I cried on her shoulder while she held me, stroking my hair like you do with a scared child. When I could finally speak, I told her everything. Every word I heard. Every detail of Harper's plan. Every lie of the last years that was now exposed. Betty listened in silence. Her expression went from surprise to horror, and finally to a cold rage I had never seen in her. When I finished speaking, she stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she got up, went to her kitchen, and came back with 2 cups of hot tea. She put one in my trembling hands. She sat in front of me and spoke with a controlled voice, but full of contained fury. She said she always knew Harper was a snake, that she had seen the signs for years but that I didn't want to listen, that it hurt her to be right about this because it meant I had suffered unnecessarily all this time. I asked her what I should do, if I should go to the dinner as if nothing had happened, if I should confront Harper, if I should simply disappear and start over somewhere where she couldn't find me. I felt lost, incapable of making decisions, paralyzed by pain and betrayal. Betty took my hands in hers. She looked me straight in the eye and said the first thing was to protect my assets, that I couldn't let Harper keep the house, that I needed to cancel that transfer immediately, that tomorrow we would call Arthur and ask him to destroy those documents. But she also said that wasn't enough, that Harper wouldn't stop just because she didn't get the house, that she would keep looking for ways to manipulate me, to get money out of me, to eventually fulfill her plan of institutionalizing me, that I needed concrete evidence of my daughter's intentions, something that would protect me legally if she tried to declare me incompetent. I told her there was no way to prove what I heard, that it was my word against hers, that no one would believe me. Betty shook her head. She said we had to be smarter than Harper, that we had to make her reveal her true intentions in a way that was recorded. She suggested I go to the dinner as planned, that I act normal, that I give her no sign that I knew anything, but instead of handing her the house tonight, invent an excuse. Say there was a problem with the papers, a delay in the process, something that sounded credible. Observe Harper's reaction carefully. Then, in the following days, Betty would help me document everything, review my finances in detail to find proof of the diverted money. Talk to Arthur not just about canceling the transfer, but about protecting me legally. Maybe even hire a private investigator if necessary. But above all, Betty said, I needed to start rebuilding my life beyond Harper, reconnect with lost friendships, find my own activities, create a support network that made it impossible for my daughter to isolate me, because that had been her greatest weapon, turning me into a lonely and dependent woman who had no one but her. I asked her if she thought there was any chance it was all a misunderstanding, that maybe Harper didn't mean it seriously, that maybe it was just a stupid conversation with her friend, and deep down she did love me. I know it sounded pathetic even as I said it. Betty squeezed my hands tight. She told me firmly to stop looking for excuses for Harper, that what I heard was the naked truth, that my daughter didn't love me and probably never had, that I needed to accept that horrible and painful reality because only by accepting it could I start to protect myself. She said something else that stuck in me like a thorn. She said the worst enemy I had now wasn't Harper, but my own need to believe she was good, that need had blinded me for years, that continuing to cling to the illusion of the loving daughter was what kept me vulnerable to her manipulations. She was right. I knew it. But accepting it meant renouncing the only family I had left. It meant admitting I had wasted 20 years loving someone who only used me. It meant ending up completely alone in this world. And that loneliness terrified me more than anything else. Betty must have seen the fear in my eyes, because her expression softened. She told me I wasn't alone, that she would be with me every step, that other neighbors in the building who had known me for years would also support me if I asked for help, that the loneliness I feared was another lie Harper had made me believe, that there were good people in my life. Only my daughter had made sure to keep me away from all of them. I looked at the clock. It was almost 6:15. Dinner started at 7 at a restaurant downtown. Harper had reserved a private room for 50 people. Her friends, Liam's parents and siblings, some distant cousins of mine I hardly saw would be there. All those people waiting to celebrate the happy couple's engagement, and I would arrive, knowing it was all a farce, that my daughter's love was a lie, that her plans included destroying me, slowly and systematically. But I would have to smile. I would have to act as if I didn't know anything. I would have to hug her and wish her happiness while inside my soul was bleeding out. Betty helped me get ready. She lent me makeup to hide my swollen eyes. She combed my hair carefully. She ironed my dress as best she could. I looked in her mirror and seemed almost normal. Only someone who knew me very well would notice the pain behind the eyes. The way my smile didn't reach anywhere else on my face. Before leaving, Betty made me promise I wouldn't hand anything to Harper tonight, that I would invent any excuse but keep those documents safe, that tomorrow morning we would go together to see Arthur and start protecting what was left. I promised her. She hugged me tight and told me to be strong, that I could do this. I took a cab to the restaurant. I didn't have the strength for the bus again. During the ride, I practiced my expression in my compact mirror. Soft smile, bright eyes, mother happy for her daughter's wedding. A performance as fake as the one Harper had been giving for years. The difference was, I was acting to survive. She did it out of pure malice. I arrived at the restaurant at 5 to 7. It was an elegant place with white tablecloths and chandeliers at every table. The private room was on the second floor. I walked up the stairs, feeling each step weigh on me, like I was carrying stones in my shoes. I could hear the cheerful voices of people who had already arrived. Laughter, soft background music, the clinking of glasses toasting. I took a deep breath before entering. I put the rehearsed smile on my face. I pushed the door and entered the room. The place looked beautiful. White and gold balloons decorated the corners. A long table was set with elegance. Fresh flowers in the center. Everything perfect. Everything festive. Liam was near the entrance talking to his parents. He saw me enter and approached immediately with that warm smile he always had for me. He greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, asked how I was, if I had a good trip getting here. I answered automatically. Good, thanks. Yes, everything's fine. Everything looks so lovely. My lips said the right words while my mind screamed that he knew nothing, that he was about to marry a woman who didn't love him, that he was another victim of Harper just like me. Then I saw her. Harper entered the room from another side, probably coming from the restroom. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that was gorgeous and surely cost a fortune. Her hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She looked radiant, happy, the perfect image of the excited bride. Our gazes met. For a second, I saw something in her eyes. Maybe it was my imagination, but I seemed to see a flash of something cold, calculating. Then she transformed completely. Her face lit up with a huge smile. She ran toward me with open arms. She hugged me tight, too tight. She whispered in my ear that she was so happy I had arrived, that tonight was so special, that she loved me so much. The same words I had heard hundreds of times. But now, knowing they were empty, that they meant nothing, that they were just part of her masterful performance, I returned the hug mechanically. I said I loved her too, that I was very happy for her, that everything looked beautiful. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears, but no one seemed to notice. Or maybe if they noticed, they attributed it to maternal emotion. Harper pulled away and looked at me with that expression I had always interpreted as filial love. Now I only saw the mask. She asked if I was feeling okay, that I looked a little tired. I told her it had been a long day, but I was perfect, that nothing would stop me from enjoying this celebration. She smiled and led me to the main table, where I would sit next to Liam and his family. She introduced me to people I didn't know. Liam's cousins, college friends, co-workers. Everyone smiling, everyone kind, everyone oblivious to the horror unfolding beneath the surface of this perfect celebration. I sat in my assigned seat. A waiter approached and offered me a glass of wine. I accepted it even though I normally don't drink much. I needed something to help me get through this night. I took a long sip, feeling the liquid burn my throat. Dinner began. They brought the dishes in elegant succession. Salad starter, then soup, then the main course, which was filet mignon with roasted vegetables. Everything looked delicious. I tasted almost nothing. Every bite got stuck in my throat. I moved the food around the plate so it looked like I was eating. Around the table, people conversed animatedly. Liam's parents told stories of when he was a boy. Harper's friends made jokes about married life. My daughter laughed at all the appropriate moments, touched Liam's arm affectionately, looked completely in love. I watched her, studied every gesture, every expression, looking for signs of the real Harper, the one who had spoken with such contempt of me just a few hours ago. But I found nothing. Her performance was perfect, impenetrable. If I hadn't heard that conversation in the old house, I never would have suspected anything. Liam stood up when they finished serving dessert. He asked for attention, tapping his glass gently with a fork. The room went silent. Everyone looked at him expectantly. He gave a brief but emotional speech, spoke about how he met Harper, how he knew from the first moment she was special, how every day by her side confirmed he had found his life partner. He spoke about the values she had, her kindness, her dedication to family. He looked toward me when he said that last part. He thanked me for raising such a wonderful woman. The people applauded. Harper wiped a tear with delicacy. I applauded too, hands moving on their own while my mind screamed the truth no one else knew. Liam was a good man being deceived by a professional liar, and I couldn't do anything to save him without destroying my own credibility. After Liam, his father spoke, then his mother. Both officially welcomed Harper to the family, spoke about how happy they were to have such a loving daughter-in-law, about how they looked forward to the grandchildren that would surely come, about the happy years awaiting the bride and groom. Then Harper stood up. She said she wanted to thank everyone for coming, that tonight meant a lot to her, that she was surrounded by the people she loved most in the world. Her gaze rested on me when she said that. She smiled at me with fake tenderness. She said she especially wanted to thank her mom, that I had been her rock, her support, her role model all her life, that everything she was she owed to me, that she hoped to one day be as good a mother as I had been. The words were like daggers wrapped in velvet. People sighed, moved, some wiped their eyes. I kept the frozen smile while inside something broke even more. Harper raised her glass, proposed a toast to me, to the best mother in the world. Everyone raised their glasses. Everyone said cheers, looking at me with affection. I raised mine too, participating in my own public humiliation. I drank the wine, feeling like I was drowning. Harper sat back down, leaned toward me and took my hand across the table, squeezed it gently, whispered that she loved me. I nodded without being able to speak. If I opened my mouth, I feared a scream would come out instead of words. The evening continued. More conversations, more laughter. Someone put on music. Some couples started dancing in the open space of the room. Liam invited Harper to the dance floor. I watched them dance together, him looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world, her acting the role of a woman in love to perfection. I slipped away to the restroom. I needed a moment alone before collapsing completely. I locked myself in one of the stalls and sat on the toilet lid with my head in my hands. I breathed deep, trying to calm myself. Not much longer. I just had to hold on a little more. Then I could go home and fall apart in private. I heard someone else enter the restroom. Heels clicking on the tiles. Then voices. I recognized one of them. It was Sloane, Harper's friend, the same one who had been with her at the old house. She was talking to another woman I didn't identify. I stayed completely still in the stall. I even held my breath. Sloane was touching up her makeup from what I heard. The other woman asked if Harper had already received her mom's gift. Sloane let out a conspiratorial giggle, said not yet, but surely Eleanor would hand it over before the night ended. That Harper had been acting anxious all evening, waiting for that moment. The other woman asked what it was. Sloane lowered her voice, but I could still hear perfectly in the silence of the bathroom. She said it was the family house, that it was worth a fortune, that the poor old lady was going to gift it to her, believing she was doing something nice for her daughter, that Harper would sell it as soon as she could and pocket all the money. The other woman whistled, impressed, asked if Liam knew. Sloane said no, that he had no idea about anything, that Harper had him completely fooled, that the guy really believed he was marrying a good and loving woman. Both laughed. Then Sloane said something that made me squeeze my eyes shut. She said the best part was that afterward, Harper was going to get rid of the mother, that she already had everything planned. That in less than a year, Eleanor would be locked up in some cheap nursing home and Harper would be collecting her Social Security check plus having kept all her assets. The other woman asked if that wasn't very cruel. Sloane replied that Harper said her mother was a burden, that she deserved it for being so soft and manipulatable, that in this world the weak end up being devoured by the strong, that Eleanor had had a whole lifetime to toughen up and had chosen to be a victim, that now she would have to live with the consequences. I heard purses closing, heels walking toward the door. Before leaving, Sloane said she had to get back to the room, that Harper was probably looking for her, that she couldn't miss the moment the old lady handed over the house, that it would be a show worth seeing. The door closed. I was alone again. Sloane's words echoed in my head. Old fool, weak, victim, burden. Every insult was like a lash. But beneath the humiliation, I felt something else start to grow. Something I hadn't felt in hours. Rage. Not explosive and uncontrollable rage, but something cold and clear. A decision taking shape in my mind. Harper thought I was weak, that I was manipulatable, that I would fall into her trap without resistance. She and her friends saw me as something pathetic, something to laugh at, something that could be used and discarded without consequences. But they were wrong. I wasn't weak. I had survived my husband's death. I had raised a daughter alone. I had worked for years in exhausting jobs. I had endured pain and loneliness and was still standing. What they confused with weakness was kindness, and kindness didn't mean being stupid. I came out of the stall. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I saw the same woman as before, but with something different in the eyes, a determination that hadn't been there a few hours ago. I fixed my hair, touched up my lipstick, wiped away any trace of tears. I went back to the room walking with my back straight. Harper saw me enter and approached immediately, asking if I was okay. I told her perfectly, that I just needed a moment. She looked at me with that expression of fake concern, touched my arm with feigned gentleness. Then she asked the question she had been waiting all night to ask. She told me in a casual voice if I had brought something special for her, that I had mentioned a few weeks ago that I had a surprise planned, that she was curious to know what it was. I looked her straight in the eye. I saw the greed barely disguised behind her sweet smile. I saw the woman who planned to destroy me, who had been using me for years, who despised me in secret while pretending to love me in public. I returned the smile. I told her yes, I had prepared something special. I saw her eyes light up with anticipation. I saw her preparing to receive what she believed was hers. I saw the victory in her expression ahead of time. But then I told her that unfortunately a last-minute problem had come up, that the lawyer had called me this afternoon informing me of a snag with the paperwork, something related to municipal permits that weren't complete, that she would have to wait a few more weeks until everything was in order. I saw how her expression changed, the smile freezing, the eyes hardening for a fraction of a second before she recovered control. She asked what kind of problem exactly. Her voice sounded tense, trying to appear casual. I gave her vague explanations, things that sounded technical and boring. I saw the frustration growing in her, even though she tried to hide it. Finally, she said it didn't matter, that the important thing was we were together, celebrating. But her hug when she pulled me toward her was mechanical, fake even for her standards. The rest of the evening, Harper was different, tenser, less convincing in her acting. I saw her talking in a corner with Sloane. The two looked at me. Sloane said something in her ear. Harper shook her head, irritated. Liam noticed his fiancée's mood change, asked if something was wrong. She told him she was tired, that it had been a very long day. He was understanding as always, suggested that if she wanted, they could end the evening early. She accepted with evident relief. The party started to break up around 10:30. People were saying goodbye, thanking me for coming, telling me how lovely the couple looked, how happy they would be together. I nodded and smiled while planning my next steps. Harper approached to say goodbye, gave me a cold kiss on the cheek, told me she would call me tomorrow to see how the paperwork was going, that she wanted to help with whatever was needed to solve the problem, that after all, it was something important for both of us. I told her not to worry, that I would take care of everything, that she just had to concentrate on her wedding preparations. She insisted. Said it was no bother, that maybe we could go together to see the lawyer, that 4 eyes see more than 2. I understood perfectly what she was doing. She wanted to make sure I didn't change my mind. She wanted to be present at every step of the process to ensure the house ended up in her hands. But now that I knew her true intentions, I could see every move clearly. I told her firmly that it wasn't necessary, that Arthur was very competent, and we had already spoken about how to proceed, that in a few weeks everything would be resolved, and then we could celebrate properly. I saw the flash of frustration in her eyes again. I left the restaurant alone, took a taxi back home. During the ride, I called Betty. I told her briefly how the night had gone, that I hadn't handed anything to Harper, that I had seen her reaction when I invented the excuse, that now I was sure beyond any doubt that everything I heard was true. Betty told me I had done well, that tomorrow morning we would go together to see Arthur, that we would start taking real measures to protect me, that this was just beginning, but we were on the right track. I arrived at my apartment close to 11 at night. I took off the burgundy dress and folded it carefully. I would probably never wear it again. It was contaminated with the memories of this horrible night. I put on my nightgown and sat on the bed, took out my phone and looked for Arthur's number in my contacts, sent him a message telling him I needed to see him urgently tomorrow, first thing, that I had changed my mind about the house transfer, that I needed his advice on other legal matters too. Arthur replied in less than 5 minutes. He told me he could see me at 9 in the morning at his office, to bring all the documents I had, not to worry, that we would find the best solution. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake looking at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened, about everything I had to do. But I wasn't crying anymore. The tears had dried up. In their place was something more solid, a purpose. At 8 the next morning, Betty knocked on my door. She brought coffee and danishes from the bakery on the corner. We ate breakfast together in comfortable silence. She knew I didn't need words in that moment. Just her presence was enough. We walked to Arthur's office. It was a sunny but cold day, the kind of morning that promises a new beginning. We arrived on time. The secretary showed us in immediately. Arthur received me with evident concern on his face. I told him everything. Every detail of what I had heard in the old house, what Sloane said in the restaurant bathroom, the years of financial manipulation, the complete plan to institutionalize me and keep everything. He listened without interrupting, taking notes on a pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long sigh. He told me he was very sorry for what was happening, that he had had doubts when I asked him to prepare the transfer, but it wasn't his place to question my decisions. I asked him what I could do. Arthur said the first thing was to protect my assets immediately. He would cancel the house transfer documents. But he also suggested something else, making a clear will, specifying exactly what would happen to my assets if something happened to me. And even more important, naming someone trustworthy as power of attorney in case someone tried to declare me incompetent. Betty volunteered without me asking. She said she would gladly be my proxy, that she had known me for years, that she could testify to my complete lucidity, that she would never allow Harper to lock me up anywhere. Arthur prepared the documents right there. A will leaving the house to a charity foundation after my death. My Social Security would cease with me, so Harper couldn't claim any of that. The few savings I had left would also go to charities. I signed everything feeling strangely liberated. Then Arthur said we needed evidence of Harper's intentions. Asked if I had access to my bank statements from the last few years. I told him yes. He asked me to bring them all to review together and document any irregularity. I spent the next few days gathering papers. I found the receipts for the transfers I had made to Harper, the loans she never paid back, the inexplicable charges on my credit card that I now remembered she had borrowed several times. It all added up to over $15,000 in the last 3 years. Arthur prepared a detailed report, said that if Harper tried to declare me incompetent, this document would serve as counter-evidence. It would show a pattern of financial abuse on her part, not mental deterioration on mine. Harper called me 3 times that first week, every call more insistent than the last. She wanted to know about the house papers. She wanted us to go to the notary together. She wanted to help me solve the supposed problem. I told her I was working on it, to have patience, that everything would be resolved soon. I could hear the growing frustration in her voice, the tension, the barely contained rage. She didn't bother so much to sound sweet anymore. The mask was falling off. 2 weeks after the engagement dinner, Harper showed up at my apartment without warning. She knocked insistently until I opened. She stormed in asking what was really going on. Why was I avoiding her? Why wasn't the house thing moving forward? I looked at her calmly. I told her I had decided not to transfer the property for now, that I needed to think things over better, that maybe I would sell it myself and use the money for my old age. I saw all pretense of sweetness disappear from her face. She told me I couldn't do that I had promised her, that I had given her hopes, that it wasn't fair for me to change my mind now. Her voice rose in volume with every phrase. She wasn't faking anymore. She wasn't acting. This was the real Harper showing herself finally. I replied with a quiet voice that it was my house and I could do whatever I wanted with it, that promises can be changed, that I had reconsidered my priorities. I saw her face turn red with rage. Then she exploded. She screamed at me that I was a selfish old woman, that after everything she had put up with by my side, I owed her that house, that she had wasted years of her life taking care of me when she could have been doing better things, that I had no right to back out now. I told her nobody asked her to take care of me, that if it was all a burden, she should have left years ago, that I never forced her to stay. She let out a bitter laugh, said of course she didn't leave, because she needed to make sure that in the end all that sacrifice was worth it. I asked her directly what sacrifice, what exactly she had done for me that wasn't a performance to keep me hooked. Harper stayed quiet for a moment. Then she said with a venomous voice that the sacrifice of enduring having a pathetic and needy mother, that pretending she loved me when in reality she despised me. Finally, she had said it. To my face, without witnesses, but not caring anymore. I told her calmly that I knew, that I had heard her conversation at the old house, that I knew about her plans to institutionalize me, to sell the property, to steal my Social Security, that I knew everything. I saw the color drain from her face, how she opened her mouth unable to speak, how for the first time in her life she didn't know what to say, what act to stage. I told her I had already taken legal measures, that she would never get the house or my money, that if she tried to declare me incompetent, I would have documented proof of her financial abuse. Harper reacted like a cornered animal. She screamed that I had no proof of anything, that no one would believe me, that everyone would think I was senile and paranoid, that she would make sure everyone saw how crazy I was. I showed her the folders Arthur had prepared, the bank statements, the documented transfers, Betty's written testimony about years of observing her behavior, everything perfectly organized and notarized. I told her if she made a single move against me, these documents would go directly to Liam and his family. The threat worked. Harper understood she had lost. She looked at me with a hatred so pure it was almost refreshing. At least there was no falsehood anymore. She told me I would regret this, that I would end up alone, that I would never know her children, that I would die abandoned without family. I replied that I preferred to die alone and with dignity than live deceived and robbed by my own daughter, that she was already dead to me anyway, that the daughter I thought I had never really existed, that the only thing I regretted was taking so long to see it. Harper left, slamming the door. It was the last time I saw her. 3 days later, I received a call from Liam. His voice sounded destroyed. He told me he had ended the engagement with Harper, that she had confessed everything in a fit of rage when he asked why I had canceled my attendance at a family gathering, that he couldn't believe the woman he loved was capable of planning something so cruel against her own mother. I thanked him for believing me. He said he was sorry he hadn't seen the signs sooner, that he wished he had known the real Harper before falling in love with the fake one. I told him it wasn't his fault, that she was an expert manipulator, that he deserved someone genuine. I sold the house 3 months later, not for $400,000 as Harper had calculated, but for $450,000 after making some minor repairs. I used part of the money to travel, to take those painting classes I had wanted to take years ago, to finally live for myself. I reconnected with old friends from the neighborhood. I started going to a book club at the library. Betty and I traveled together to the beach that summer. For the first time in decades, I felt free. Alone, yes, but free. Sometimes I think of Harper. I wonder if she will ever feel remorse, if someday she will look back and regret destroying the only relationship that should have been sacred. But probably not. People like her rarely change. I learned that true love is shown with actions, not words. That family isn't always the one born with you, but the one you choose. That it's never too late to recover your dignity, even if it hurts to leave illusions behind. I am 65 years old. Maybe I don't have many left, but the ones I have left will be mine. I will live surrounded by people who genuinely appreciate me, without manipulations, without lies, without carrying the weight of loving someone who never loved me back. And that, finally, is enough.